Everybody, welcome to Wednesday. This is Wednesday, Wisdom Wednesday, my corny title for my Wednesday programming. Today, I want to talk about how the strength of your subcontractor network and the people and vendors that you associate with are the number one thing that are the foundation of your company, and talk about a couple, specifically one horror story, but I've had multiple along this same vein that I've had with subcontractors, how to navigate that, and how to not get caught up in it, and the idea of forgiveness and moving on. It's easy in this business to feel personally slighted, but it's really not beneficial long term. When I was about 10 years in, I've been doing this now for almost 20 years. I originally got licensed in 2000, late 07. About 10 years in, I had quite a few projects going, specifically one in a wealthier suburb of the Bay Area, and then a couple others in these little niche neighborhoods in the San Jose area and in the peninsula of the Bay Area. And they were, there was a new home, another one that was a complete rebuild, and another one that was an addition and remodel, but it was pretty complex because we were adding on a second story. We had to set some steel beams, and we had to do some kind of intricate framing and tie-in work. And at the time, I had been doing a lot of the framing in-house. I had a robust carpentry crew, but I decided I wasn't going to be doing that because I wanted to focus more on growing the business and managing, like project management over running carpenters and project management running a construction company. One thing I found, little tidbit of advice, is it's hard when you're running. A lot of times what general contractors do is they'll hire a bunch of carpenters or they'll hire a bunch of finished trades in-house so they can control that. But what inevitably happens is you end up managing a company within a company, because you're managing large framing jobs, you're managing interior trim jobs, and you're also trying to manage client relationships and the day-to-day operations of managing a large-scale construction project. So I decided I'm going to bring on a framing contractor to do the framing on these three projects. In doing so, I was introduced to a framer, I won't name names, that came recommended by another builder that I know who had worked with this person in the past, and it seemed like a good fit. We met, talked about it, and decided he was going to help me on framing these three projects. So we figure it out, get our costs in place, get our contracts in place, and start moving forward. And at first everything was going good. This is actually a pretty skilled framer. Had a 6-person crew plus himself, who was actually out in the field framing. And these jobs weren't exactly, at the same time. It was a bit staggered, so you could start one, get it to the point of rough, get the rough trades in, move on to the next one. One of them overlapped a little bit, but it was manageable because the ones that overlapped, it could, a 3 or 4 person framing crew and a 2 or 3 on the other one would suffice. It didn't need the whole 6-7 person crew. So it worked out in that sense. So we start off on one of the projects and everything's going well. That was the second story addition. There's a large steel beam that had to get set. He helped and coordinate with the steel contractor to set this steel beam in this property, set the steel beam, got the second floor framed. For the most part, there was pickup work. We got through that, moved on to the second project, which was the larger scale project that was new, and the other smaller addition. And those were going fine until we ran into a snag where the progress started just slowing in general. And instead of getting the 3 or 4 person crew that I needed, I was getting 1 or 2 guys a day, make some days excuses as to why they couldn't show up, and then a period of 2 or 3 days where we weren't having progress on the site, and there was always a reason why we were waiting for this structural beam to show up, or we didn't have the materials and we need to get this or that, and oh sorry, I had to run over and take care of an emergency on another job. So cracks started to form in this foundation of the relationship with this framer, and I didn't know quite how to manage that at the time, because I was really at the mercy of this framer because I didn't have my framing crew doing it. I couldn't control the workflow. I was relying on this subcontractor and this framer to complete the project in a certain amount of time, and I had made promises to my project owner that I was going to get that done in this amount of time as well. And I had financial ties, kind of built into the project, that we hit certain milestones, and that's when I get paid, and that's when he gets paid, and that's when, we keep things flowing from a cash flow perspective. That's very important. So me and him started to butt heads, and my way of dealing with it at the time, mostly because I was dealing from a place of reaction and really just needed to get my job done, was I kept on amping up the pressure and getting angrier and angrier that he wasn't getting done what needed to get done on the project. We'd had slow progress, and all the while, generally not as motivated. They'll give you the skeleton crew, or they'll give you the 1 or 2 guys to slow finish so they can go get the real money they're getting on the new starts or the projects where they're in the middle of it and in the meat where they can get big draws. So we started to slow, and I was getting a little heat from my project owners. Why don't we have a proper framing crew on site? Why are things going slow? This, that, or the other. Luckily, it wasn't a quality issue. It was really a speed issue, and it was really a staffing issue. But you'll see how this all comes to a head. I start amping up the pressure. It's excuse after excuse as to why he's not performing and why he can't get the job done in a certain amount of time, and it's going to take a little longer. And it came to a head when on one of the projects, there was a simple request from the owner that they wanted to add soffitted eaves around the perimeter of the house. Now, what that means, this was a single level house that we were building, and instead of having your rafter tails come down, overhang the exterior at a slope, and you see the exposed rafter tails with whatever wood is above the rafter tails, and then that gets painted, stained, etc. When you soffit the eaves, you frame back flush to the house, and then you side underneath the soffit, so you have siding around the perimeter, flat, parallel with the ground. It's just a cleaner look. It's a nicer look. And what the request was that we have the framer frame in the soffitted eaves, which means from the fascia back to the house, a 2x getting framed parallel to the ground all the way around the perimeter, so that eventually our sider can come in and install siding on the soffit all the way around the perimeter and give it a nice clean finished look. This is probably something that would have taken the framer 2 days with his crew. It's not a huge ask. Well, when the request was made, it took him a couple of days to even get back to me, and he said the cost is going to be $24,000 to soffit these eaves. And that was just a completely absurd price. I knew it. And I couldn't go back to the owner with that price because it's just laughable. It should have been a $3,000 to $5,000 request, and he would have made money, got it done quickly. Everyone would have been happy. I could have had my markup, but he said, $24,000, and it was obvious it was because he was running out of money on the project. We had come towards the end where he still had 75% left, but had been paid 90%. And he needed to somehow recoup those funds. And I think the way he was going to do it was overcharge me on these eaves, hoping I would bite and pay. And he would be able to then afford to adequately staff my project to finish it. I didn't realize that the slow play, the sending one or two guys, or even just him showing up on a Saturday to try to get some of the framing done, and my jobs greatly suffering because work had all but ceased. It was just at a turtle's pace, was because he couldn't afford to continue to work on the job at the pace he was working before because he had tapped out those funds. Whatever he was doing with the money, or if he just had too much overhead, or whatever it may be, maybe he mispriced the job. That's why my job was suffering. And that's what I didn't realize was, you don't know a sub, or you don't know a person's situation. So you have to be very careful, and this is why payment schedules and tracking invoicing in relation to progress of the job really matter in construction. Because if you get yourself in a scenario where someone's been overpaid and they just don't have the resources, that could be a really good person and a really well-intentioned person, but if they just can't do the rest of the work because they've tapped out their funds, they've tapped out their resources, and they need to go make more money, they may be good intention, but they're gonna have to go where they're getting paid. So that's just the laws of nature. It's the rules of the game, unfortunately. So we hit ahead. I tell him I'm not approving the $24,000 change order. This sours the relationship even more because he thought it was going to be money in the bag and he'd be able to finish. Meanwhile, I'm amping up the pressure. You need to get this done. You need to get this done. Until it finally grinds to a complete halt because he started to claim that he needs another draw in order to continue work on the progress or the project. And of course, I'm not going to give him another draw because he's done 75%. And I've paid him 90, but he wants another 5 to 8% draw on the project, and he's telling me, hey, I need to get paid if you're gonna, continue to have me working on the project. And I'm telling him, hey, you've been paid well above and beyond. Now in his mind, oh no, I haven't. I've been paid what I invoiced you for, but I'm invoicing you for more. He's not looking at it as in relation to progress percentage on the project. He's just looking at, this is what I invoiced you. I'm gonna finish it. I need money. Now, I'm not willing to give him that money because I need the carrot to be dangled so he has a reason to finish. Now we've hit an impasse. Now he stops work on both projects short of completion. I'm left holding the bag trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to get this project done, not look bad with my project owner and keep the project progressing. He's dug in. Now I've mentioned my one and only lawsuit where I've been sued in the past. What I didn't mention was when I've had to get an attorney involved to help me and protect me on my end. And this is the one time that I had to do that. So I didn't really have an attorney at the time, but he all but abandoned the project in my eyes. He stopped work. Now there's little technicalities surrounding that, especially in California, so you can look into those. But he would randomly send one person over, he'd go tinker around and do this or that so he could claim he didn't stop work on the project. However, nothing was happening of substance. The project was stalled out. I found an attorney, approached the attorney, showed him my contracts, told him what was going on, and he basically said, well, all you can do is claim that he's abandoned the project. Your contract, and as most contracts are in California, mandate, and what was signed is that you go to a mandatory arbitration to resolve any conflicts. So we're going to have to send this in, demand arbitration, get an arbitration date, and hopefully then come to some conclusion. The thing is, when you go to an arbitration, first of all, you have to file all the paperwork. You go back and forth. They have to receive it. They have to confirm. When you go to an arbitration, it's not like, hey, we have a conflict, we need to arbitrate this and figure out the resolution. let's do it in 3 days so we can keep progress going. No, it's like, okay, this is the problem. Let's write letters back and forth to them, and their attorney's going to get it, or they're going to get an attorney to write a letter back. That's going to take 4, 5, 6 weeks, to the point where we even get to the point of filing something and then submitting that to the arbitration or the mediation company, and then that company is going to spit out a date that's like 3 or 4 months in the future. Like, nothing happens fast at all. So this is all fine and dandy from a financial perspective, where maybe I'm trying to recoup funds because I've overpaid him, but still, I have a project to get done. So what I ended up having to do, because we were dug in, I had to get an attorney involved, writing letters, and go to arbitration. And in going to arbitration, all I was claiming is he's been overpaid for the work, he abandoned the work, I need to get this much money back from what I paid him. That's my claim. But when you go to arbitration, typically you don't get all the money you're asking for. There's always some BS settlement where, oh, how about I give you 20% of what you're asking for just so we can part ways. So it's really not a resolution that helps the progress on the job or helps you move forward. So that whole process is going on. Meanwhile, I have to get another framer involved that, of course, when you're midway through a project and I'm at 75%, I need to push the other 25%, and I need to get a new framing company. No subcontractor, no framing company wants to come get involved in a project 75, 3/4 of the way through and pick up where somebody left off and charge you similar to what this company was charging. No, you're going to get the 3-4x fee, because it's a headache for them. They need to know what this company was doing, where they were at, what they left off. Are all their 835 clips, or the hurricane type, blah, 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 blah. This is everything in order? Like, where are they at with the project? Assess that, and then move forward. And now they're on the hook for the whole project, because when a company comes in after another company, they're now liable for everything because they've touched multiple components. It's not like there's a clear delineation of where 75% is, and then you go on from there. No, there's this that feathers into that touches this, that structural clip ties to that, and now you're really liable for the whole structure. So once you have to get somebody involved half, 3/4 of the way through, it's a real nightmare from a cost perspective, because not many companies want to do it, and you're going to pay a huge premium. And in this scenario, I can't go back to the client, try to charge them more. So what am I left to do but I'm pay them out of pocket? So I'm going to lose money in this scenario because I didn't manage the subcontractor relationship properly in the beginning. From a contractual basis, from a draw perspective, I trusted too much that they were going to get the work done properly because of their performance on the first. So I floated them more money. And it's easy to do this in construction, especially when you get friendly with people, especially when you know they can perform the work. To give them money more than they should get in advance. You don't always want to be the stickler asshole that's like, nope, this is where you're at, I'm paying you exactly this, I don't care if you need more. We don't like working for those people, but there's a reason that mentality works, because you're really protecting your downside and not getting yourself in a situation where you're left holding the bag, as I was in this scenario. So I find another sub, get them involved. I think it ended up costing me, 20, 25K in addition to what I thought I was going to be paying him. Got the project back on track. In the meantime, when the attorneys get involved, the daggers come out. So once you get involved with writing letters back and forth to the attorneys, and then everyone digs in on their position, it becomes a real nightmare. So he dug in on his position, I dug in on my position. What he did on the 2 projects that he walked off on is filed a lien for the remaining dollar amounts of his contract on both projects, claiming that he's owed that I kicked him off the job. Because I started writing letters from the attorney telling him that I'm going to get another company involved, he claimed that I kicked him off the job and that he's due the rest of the balance of his contract. And my contention was, bullshit, you abandoned the job, you owe me money, I needed to get the work done, so I had to bring in another builder. So I'm left to deal with him filing liens on both properties. I had to go to both property owners because, of course, they received the liens and asked what the hell's going on. Explain to them the whole scenario, eat crow, which sucks. But in these scenarios, in every scenario, really, the only medicine is 100% transparency and honesty. Luckily, I have tight relationships with my clients, and they completely understood shit happens. I was in a battle with this guy. As long as it's not going to cost them money and their project's going to get done, they're lenient. So explain to them. We maintained a good relationship through the process. Fast forward, where we landed was, months later, we're sitting in front of a mediator at arbitration. He's in one room, I'm in another room. We're going back and forth, back and forth. He's making his claims as to why he's owed his money. I'm making my claims as to how he abandoned my project, what it cost me to finish with another carpentry company, and how much it delayed me, and these are my damages. And over the course of, this must have been 8 hours of back and forth arbitration. What happens in arbitration is you have an arbitrator or a mediator that acts as like the go-between between the parties. So they'll come into your room and say, okay, well, this is what this person's asking for, and let me hear your side of the story and what you think is fair. And then they take what I say and they go back to that person in that room and say, well, this is what Ken thinks is fair, and this is what and then they just go back and forth, and they kind of play each side, where every time they come in, they're like, hey, bud, let's talk. I'm your guy. Yeah, like I'm with you. I'm just looking for a resolution, and hey, I really understand where you're coming from. It's all kind of a crock of shit, but it's fine. We ended up basically walking away with him removing the liens on the property. There was like a $12,000 payment, and it was all said and done. So after all that, I got back a little money. The liens were obviously removed from the property because they were just BS liens. It was just all part of his tactic to stress me out in battling back and forth with the attorneys. And I had to get another framing company involved. And beyond that, it was just a very stressful time going through that. It's not fun to go through that. So all in all, just really made me realize how the quality of your subs can really affect the outcome of your project, your performance, and just your general state of mind. I use that as a real learning experience, and I really make sure now, number one, that when I'm on a project, I vet the sub thoroughly, and I look at the contracts early on to make sure at any point in their draw schedule, or if there's not a draw schedule, I really review their invoices and see what they're invoicing compared to where they're at to date, to make sure that they're not getting too far ahead of the game. Because any sub can get in a scenario where they're in a cash flow crunch and they need to go make the money somewhere else. So I really review that. I have a conversation with the subs early on, just transparently telling them that I'm not going to just be floating cash. I'm not the bank. I'm going to pay them for the work that's been done, but we're not going to get ahead of that. And if anything, I try to set up draw schedules or payment schedules that keep me a little bit ahead of the game. So there is always that like proverbial carrot. You don't want to be an asshole and like starve out your subs, but like it is a push-pull when it comes to the subcontractor relationship, where you need to make sure you have enough, out there that they're going to be incentivized to work, and they're getting paid enough to keep them happy on the project. That's like the key thing. Again, with all things being equal, that the subcontractor is a quality subcontractor. I think that's like a non-starter if they're not quality. I'm strictly talking about the starter is they're a quality subcontractor, and then moving on from there, managing the relationship from a contractual and a cash flow perspective. I could have avoided that. I could have avoided the anger and heartache. I could have avoided, eating crow and looking bad in front of my project owners if I was just a little tighter on that. And now I am to date. So, that was a scenario that I don't want to experience again, but it taught me a lot. And a lot of times, we have to learn from the mistakes we make. But yeah, managing the relationship and workflow, cash flow of our subcontractors. We are only as good as our subcontractors. We are only as good as our subcontractors. We are only as good as our subcontractors, as builders, as general contractors. So keep in mind that relationship is so important. Thank you, everybody.